My name is Dennis. Background on me, I'm an engineer by trade, about 14 years in the industry. Currently co-founder of Definitive. We're a crypto trading platform. Done a couple $1 billion in volume. So really hard financial product we've built. And ever since January, we've basically kind of renovated the company to be very AI enabled. And I'm gonna walk you guys through exactly what we did so that you can, instill this in your industry, or in your company, or like think about it for yourselves as well. So this is how we ship today. I want to show you guys a miniature example of just one small feature that we were able to ship, 1 week ago, for instance. My dad actually had a layover in LA at the airport, and he texted me. He was like, "Hey, I have a 6-hour layover. You want to grab lunch in the middle of the workday?" And I'm like, "I guess I can do that now because we're AI enabled." So this is what it looked like. As I'm driving to the airport, I'm playing with our app, and I realized, hey, I really needed this like small filter that showed up on this like list view. So then I posted a message about it in Slack. I tagged my designer, Elliot. Elliot responds, but what he really did was he copied my message and then posted it into his Claude Code. And his Claude Code came up with some prototypes, and he screenshotted those and posted it into the Slack. I got a notification on my phone as I'm still driving, tagged Cursor and tagged Linear to start working on the project, ticket the project, and also tagged our engineer, Danny. Now, Danny didn't write any code. Danny comes in when Cursor is done, checks out the pull request, and then just loads it up on his simulator, confirms that it did build what it was supposed to build, and then eventually merges, and then I'm eating lunch at that point. But we ended up shipping this feature to prod, in the context of like 1 hour. Now, if you think about how long something like this would have done maybe just a year ago, it would have taken roughly 3 hours by like a really dedicated, attentive team of me, my designer, and my engineer. The designer would have probably taken an hour in Figma to figure out like exactly the pixels to push around, and then we would have to spend 1 to 2 hours of an engineer's time to build and test. And then, to be honest, like this is such a small feature that's so inconsequential that I wouldn't have even bothered anyone to build it, because like why would I justify adding this small filter on this list view to bother my designer's time, my engineer's time? They're really expensive resources, and I would never justify that. But today, it took 12 minutes of active work. So 1 minute for me to check in and type the message, 5 minutes for my designer, 5 minutes for my engineer, 1 minute to merge the prod, and it's live. So that's the difference today. I'm going to show you guys how we got there. Some more outcome metrics. So since January, we've basically doubled the PR count. We've reduced the fix rate by 50%. And what that means is typically when you ship a feature, you're going to have a follow-up fix or a series of fixes. That's gone down maybe 50%. So technically, we're like 4x as productive. Turnaround day for tasks is about 1 day. So when you come up with an idea or a task, you can get it done in about less than a day for most things. And then average PR merge time is 1 hour. This is just kind of a macro example. Recently we launched a mobile app. Traditionally, a mobile app of this scale would have taken maybe 10 engineers 6 months to do. We were able to do it in 2.5 months with 3 engineers. It's live, it's doing billions of dollars in volume. And here's how kind of the PRs progressed. In January, we had about 478. We have 15 engineers, so this is like 7 PRs a week for an engineer. And now we're at around 14. So we measure this very diligently, and of course I use Claude to measure it all. And by the way, forgive some of the goofy subtitles and stuff that show up. This is all Claude generated. So cost-wise, and this is kind of what's very surprising for most, which is the cost of a senior engineer is basically like $15K a month. And the entire AI spend for my company of 15 engineers and 6 non-technical folks is about $4K a month. So for the cost of 25% of another engineer, we're able to 2x to 3x the output of the company. And this is not the result of telling your engineers, hey, just use Claude Code. You'll see that this is actually very conscious decision making around the process of how you work and changing it so that it adjusts for the talent that you have in your company. So 3 founders, technical, 11 engineers, and then just 1 designer. So first, I think the biggest hack that you can do right away is have a monorepo. We luckily transitioned to a monorepo like early last year, just through sheer luck. And then what I call Lego blocks. Lego blocks are basically, you want to stratify your API. So you have share APIs, and then you have microservices for different services like mobile, web. Maybe you have a Telegram bot, that's an API on its own. You have a component library or a design library. These are basically building blocks of your product. You want to get to a stage where you can think of a feature and tell Claude, hey, use the building blocks of my component library and come up with your best UX and design for that feature. And don't create anything crazy that's not in the design library. Once you have those building blocks, any engineer can come along and use part A, part B, part C, compose what they need, add the endpoint to the right layer, get the UX right without a designer involved. Claude is that good already. Traditionally in engineering, you had pretty large pods. You maybe had a backend engineer, a designer, a PM, a front-end engineer, and maybe someone on the sysadmin side to just check that you're deploying correctly. Now we're down to pods of 3. So typically we have one product person, one full stack person, and a rotating designer. And the product person is basically one of the founders, but can also be one of the engineers. If they have an idea that's a great feature, they'll just type it up and then kind of spec it out all the way through the design, and if it looks good enough and everybody likes it, they just implement it. So the jack of all trades type of engineer who's also product minded and very strategic about the company, they're basically a pod of one at Definitive, and they're able to ship features end to end. We had an engineer ship like a leaderboard feature recently end to end, all the way through. We had a marketing person who is not engineering, who's non-technical, ship like an additional feature on that leaderboard end to end. Didn't need to involve anybody. So this brings me to kind of like the first epiphany, which is we don't really hire pure engineers anymore. Now, this might give you some anxiety given like everyone's an engineering skill set here, but this is just more of a push that your skill set, I think, will need to transcend from pure problem solving and engineering to more soft skills and how you can grow beyond just what you've been trained to do, which is like, here's a technical problem, I need to solve the technical problem. Now, 90% of that is taken care of, and actually what you need to do is you need to be able to communicate better, and you need to be able to think more strategically, which is great. Everyone should think more strategically at a higher level. So what we actually try to hire for now, it doesn't matter if you're technical or non-technical, we actually hire for people who can do a high volume of good decisions quickly. So you can imagine in the age of AI, you're constantly talking to agents. 15 other people on your team are talking to agents, and they're producing output every minute, every hour. That's a lot of things to review and consider and be like, yes, let's do this. No, let's don't do this. Wait, this needs more fixes. Wait, this is not refined enough. You're constantly being hit by that. Me as a founder, that's my entire day. I just get pings all day. I'm on Slack. I'm a slave to Slack, basically. But it would be great if there were other people on the team that could make equally high quality decisions just as fast, right? And traditionally, the team that we've hired, they weren't hired for that, right? The founders that I have, they're in that role and they're really good at that. But the team that we hired, the engineers that are like really great at what they do, the technical scaling, whatever, they're great at that. They probably weren't good at like, hey, does this look right for the design? Does it need more refinement, right? The other thing here is we sort of treat Slack like the main brain. And if you think about your brain as an organ, like you really want to protect it. You don't want to have like this like wasted context in your brain. You don't want to overflow it or pollute it with like trash, right? So what you want to do is you want to really protect what you post in Slack if you end up using it as a brain. So what I encourage my team to do is try not to generate AI slop and post it into Slack. Try to generate only content that you find will be valuable for other humans, because the AI will be able to see everything else and structure it on its own. So for example, we ask our engineers to post an update every week at the end of the week, and it has to be mega concise. It's like basically 9 bullet points of what they did, what they're about to do, any blockers, any revelations, etc. And what this allows you to do is if you have good Slack hygiene, everyone uses threads, you have great channels for every feature, you're able to then just copy or specify the Slack channel or the Slack thread into Claude Code and tell it to and interact with it to learn stuff. So for example, we had an incident last week where the mobile API went down. And it was basically during the mobile launch, and I woke up and the incident is ongoing. There's like a 90 message Slack thread. I'm not gonna wake up and read that 90 message Slack thread. I'm gonna copy the link of that Slack thread, post it in Claude Code, tell me the summary, what's the latest status, what's critical, what's not, who's on top of it already, and then I'm gonna react from there, right? And then we were able to solve the incident right away. This is more tactical. You want depth pushed to the leaves and not, in the main core of the brain, which is Slack. So a lot of our detail is pushed into the linear tickets and the PRs itself. Claude does this automatically. You get this out of the box. And then finally, this is a hack that I've started doing recently. I ended up pairing with my engineer one day last week because I didn't have the mobile app set up on my laptop here. But I had a mobile app PR just because I had an idea and it cut the PR for me. So I needed my engineer to pull my PR, pair with me to make sure it landed the functionality that I wanted to. And while pairing, I was telling him how I would prompt to fix some of the issues we saw. And one thing he said to me was like, and this guy's a senior staff engineer. One thing he said to me was like, wow, Dennis, like, your prompting is very specific. I'm very surprised how you prompt. And that caught me off guard because I just assumed everybody was like really good at prompting. But turns out, like, some people just say, hey, there's something broken on this page. And then they spend like 10 minutes interacting with the AI to like narrow down what's broken. But this is one way where I'm like encouraging my team to prompt in the open, show off your techniques, share what gets you most precise output. And I think my team is surprised to find that like almost everything I prompt usually is like a one shot by the AI. And they're not spending time and waiting for the AI to like figure out what file they want to exit. We've basically stopped using Figma. So one of the first things my designer did in January was instead of using Figma, he created his own mobile prototype repo. So I'll show you guys what this looks like. This is just a React app that he created, but this is what he's been using as his Figma replacement since January. First, he developed an entire mobile prototype here with all the pages that we needed for our mobile app, and it's fully interactive. This is basically what Claude Design is today, but my designer built it before Claude Design came out. So you basically want to create like an interactive prototype of whatever you're building right away from a design POV. And then more recently, he made some other features which are their own kind of interactive boards with like tweaks that you can hit on the side to show you like, oh, what's next. But this is just an easier way for him to basically use Claude Code to get that design output. And this prototype basically points to our component library so that it looks very close to the ultimate output that the engineers need to implement. So you should definitely try to shift your designers to use Claude Code if possible. And then I think we opened like Figma like twice last quarter to like make some SVGs or something. And even then you don't need to use that, This one's pretty controversial, and it's not exactly face value, but we basically stopped writing tests. And I actually actively tell my AIs, please don't write tests, don't include tests. And it's weird, like we were trained as engineers to do test-driven development. We were supposed to write tests, but if you think about like why we wrote tests in the first place, you joined an org, you're a senior engineer, you wrote tests to defend your code against the next engineer that will come and fuck your code up. And probably it's some like junior engineer, someone not familiar with the code, not familiar with the context of how things should function, so you wrote tests. It's a defense. But when you have a sufficiently good AI, Claude Pro Max, 1 million context window, whatever, the correctness is very implicit. You don't need to pollute your context and your code base with a bunch of tests early on. Maybe when your feature is like basically done, you can add a suite of tests that will pretty harden the feature so that future AIs can interact successfully. But what I'm finding is that the moment I write a test or AI writes a test, the next AI is just going to change it to fit their correctness needs anyway. So then why even have it in the first place? It should be mostly correct already. And then that leaves basically the spec becoming the bottleneck. This is my responsibility. What are we building? When are we building it? What kind of style are we building it in, etc. This is really hard to solve. I'm still solving this. I've had to essentially build my own suite of 20 skills to get specs out the door in under an hour. And that's basically my whole day as well. And then finally, the last mile is the mode. So luckily, there's still hope for people who like writing artisanal code and stuff, because you can get to 0 to 90 really quickly with AI. With our mobile app, it took 2.5 months, but in the first 3 weeks, we had 50% of the app built. The last mile, took 2 months, because the bar for quality that users expect, especially consumers, has raised, right? AI has just gotten so good that there's no room for mistakes. I think in the next 6 months, you'll realize today we're seeing mistakes made on some websites, and you might call that AI slop. But in 6 months, when you see a mistake made on a website or a mobile app, you may start calling it human slop, because that's a mistake a human made because it didn't use AI to figure out how to not make that mistake, right? So now we get a bit more technical here. This is the stack that my team uses. Everyone has a Claude Code and Codex subscription. They basically have $200, $300 budget every month to use it. Then we have a backup cursor subscription, that's a company plan. We also have a company plan for Code and Codex for overflow usage. We use Greptile, which is God-level code reviewer. Pretty much Claude makes mistakes all the time, and Greptile accounts for all the mistakes and corrects them. All you have to do is tag it. It'll give you a confidence score of 5 out of 5, which we have never had a production issue when Greptile had a confidence score of 5 out of 5. We created our own internal agent. This one's pretty critical. We did this very early. We realized a lot of the time we spend that's wasteful and not innovative is when an engineer has to debug a production user issue. Maybe someone's trade went wrong. Maybe they can't see their funds. And it's very hard for that human engineer to go and figure it out without a bunch of tooling, reading logs, figuring out what the user is seeing, etc. So what we did was we built an internal OpenClaw agent. We MCP'd all of our data and logs and infra and hooked it up to this internal agent called Vidachi. Ignore the fact that he's a shirtless Italian guy. Random internal joke, but anyway, so when there's an issue, we just post it, and within 30 seconds, he's able to tell us hey, here's what might be going on. And typically, this would context switch an engineer for about an hour to solve for an end user. Now it's 30 seconds. We can quickly return on the support call. Claude design, we already chatted about this. Basically, my designer's prototype is now, we can, as a team of non-designing people, we can now use Claude design to basically do what he does and not bother him. He's only one guy supporting 15 people. And then how to parallelize your work streams. So basically, if you have 5 copies of your repo and additional tabs of Claude, you can parallelize as much as possible. There's software out of the box that can do this for you called Conductor, maybe Tmux. But you can also just do a super vanilla. For me, I do a super vanilla. I literally clone our repos 5 times into 5 different folders, and those are my 5 workspaces. And then I run a different agent in each. Works really well. You just have to build your own skills to support. This is another hack, context maps. It's super simple. It's literally a text file. I'll show you guys here. That connects to Linear, Slack, GitHub, Notion, and links to all the places where a feature may have some context. And why is this helpful? Well, if you hook it up to a skill, let's say someone new gets hired, or maybe someone on your marketing team wants to know what's the progress of this mobile app that's launching, or what's the progress of this API that's launching, or what shipped that's new in the last week. They don't need to go ask the product manager. They don't need to ask me. They don't need to ask any engineers. They just load the context map into Claude Code because we develop in the open, and they ask it questions. They're like, hey, what is new in the last 7 days, and what should I be announcing on Twitter or Telegram or in my email? And they're able to get all this information. So this is a really powerful mechanic. This is alone probably $1 billion company one day if people can figure it out for enterprise.
10 billion.
10 billion, there you go. And then this one was pretty unintuitive. You would think initially everyone builds skills, everyone on the team has different Claude skills, and then we all share it with each other, and then of course that'll make everyone better. Everyone's gonna use each other's skills, but in reality, no one uses each other's skills. It's like asking another engineer to use your laptop. It's gross. Nobody wants to do that. Nobody knows what you've configured on your terminal, etc. But what was valuable with the skills is just showing how people are using it and tuning it. So ultimately, I had some great skills, but my engineers just morphed it for their own customizations. So do share your skills, but like don't expect people to use them. Just customize them like as bespoke for the flows that you do. So what's still hard here? If you just have the wrong role and the wrong step, you can't have like a deeply technical engineer and expect them to get like pixel perfect designs at the first step. So like you really have to think about what skills does your current org have and how are they involved in feature development and place people correctly. And again, you're not going to have a product manager figure out like some quant model for predictive trading or whatever, right? They're going to come up with something, but they're not going to know how to evaluate the code, etc. So you still need like domain experts kind of verifying this every step along the way. A couple things we tried that didn't really work. We tried AI-driven planning. What it ultimately did was just created too much like noise and fluff. It's really hard to plan from an AI perspective. It'll just generate a bunch of tickets. You end up closing a bunch of them. We also had like code-based cleanups with AI, generated a bunch of PRs, basically created a bunch of like slot PRs that we didn't really need. And when you're building a financial app, every PR that you merge there's a level of risk. So you don't really want like 30 PRs all of a sudden that an engineer has to review that adds a bunch of risk to deploying your next version. Wish list here, and this is a shout out to Copious that it's not up here, but we could really use something like that. The first thing we want is visual testing harness. We want basically when I have a PR, an agent to come in, load that PR into a simulator or something, take a video, do the clip test reasonably from what he thinks the change set is, and then post that video to the PR so that I can just use my phone and review what was actually coded. This sort of exists in the form of autosana.ai. It's about $500 a month. The other thing we want is just like user simulators and chaos monkey agents, just things continuously clicking your product over and over again, trying to break it. Last thing I kind of want, but like I'm very careful about is like overnight and passive agents. So, if you have like we have an office in New York and all the engineers hang out there and they talk a lot about development and what they're building and some of the problems they're solving. It would be nice if something was listening in that room, picking up all that context, distilling it and preparing PRs from it, or giving me ideas of like what we could build next or what's hard, etc. And we're losing all of that context just because it's an in-person environment there and I'm in LA, right? So just overnight and passive agents are a little scary because you don't know what they're going to spend overnight and what they're going to do. So just be careful there. And then this is the last slide here. This is kind of what I'll leave you with, and it also sort of hints towards a second talk that I may have one day, which is ultimately the tooling that I just shown you. It's going to be commoditized. Given enough time, like 2-3 months from now, everyone is going to be doing some of these like tool changes, skills, whatever. But ultimately, just like how like Google figured out, hey, we should have like one PM, one backend engineer, one front-end engineer, and one designer per pod in like the early 2000s as the new way to work. People are trying to figure out the new way to work right now with the orgs that they had. So really, the org is the alpha, even in the new AI world. It's how do you use the talent that you have to get the extra 2x, 3x gains. It's not enough to just tell your engineers, go use Claude Code and speed up your development, because yes, they're going to do that, but then your bottleneck then becomes, oh, what about my designer? Like he or she cannot spend so much time designing for 15 people suddenly that can build features in an instant. So then how do you scale your designer? How do you then scale your product people, the founders, to make sure you're building the right thing in the right time and producing enough specs? It's really hard, and it really, really fucks up your org when you instantly AI enable your team and you don't prepare for this. And people cry and like there's a lot of problems, and that's going to be a feature talk. It's going to introduce a lot of anxiety, but I think it's really important. It's something that no one really talks about yet because not enough large or medium-sized orgs are AI enabled. But yeah, thank you so much, guys.
Testing. Okay, sweet. Amazing. If we're gonna do a couple Q&As, if anyone has questions for Dennis, but holy cow, that was sick. Anyone have questions?
That was super cool, thank you. Can you share your experience about how do you make sure you get the right context and help you make the right decisions? and what that journey was like.
Yeah, okay, so I didn't really show like the exact skills I use, but I'll describe how I spec, for instance. So I actually have a 4-skill spec pipeline. So I call it idea. And the first skill is just idea. And as I'm basically driving or out and about and I have all these ideas, I throw it into this skill. And then Claude automatically organizes and categorizes it for me. So it's almost like an encyclopedia of every like crazy idea I ever have. And then the next 3 skills are basically refinement. So the second one basically does a Q&A with me, like 20 questions, kind of like a game, and refines the idea with me from a product and strategy perspective. So like, is this impactful for the business, et cetera, those kind of things. Third skill basically marries it to our code base and estimates how real and how much effort it might be to build. And it literally connects to all of our repos and hypothetically tells me, hey, this is gonna be like 29 hours of agent effort. If human effort is gonna be like 7 days, and then like here are the risks, etc. And then the final skill is literally a build skill. It will take the execution plan in the third skill and then implement it, and then tag all the engineers for the PRs. So that's kind of my hack right now to get end-to-end idea out.
I'll just go say Figma on the side. So I see an overemphasis on Claude. So I take it that you're utilizing the actual Claude models, Opus, and Field models. Are you finding it that it's not necessary for you to orchestrate between other models, similar to what Cursor may do?
Yeah, great question.
It seems like you have a broad workflow that may require certain levels of intelligences that one model may not have.
Right, right. So the question was, are you finding that you don't need to use other models, or you may need to use other models? And what we found was basically all the models are already good enough. And the marginal gains that you get, like the 2x, 3x, or sorry, when you switch models from Claude to Codex, you're really only getting like 1.1x, 1.2x. So it's kind of not even worth it. The more significant gains that you get are from the harnessing that surrounds your operations and the org workflows that you're going to introduce. And those are very, very customized for your org. If the org that you've hired pre-AI is mostly technical, deep tech, not very product-minded, that may not actually be the org that you need now post-AI. Now post-AI, like as you saw, we need a lot of pods of one. We need jack of all trades engineers. We need people who can think from a strategic and product side because the implementation is just so much easier and solved now.
And please use Codex.
Yes, of course.
Hey man, thank you so much for the presentation. That was super, super valuable. Question that I had, so one thing that my organization is doing is that we've also been told by like leadership to just build our own internal tools, our own workflows, various things like that. I also talk to friends a lot who will say something like, you know, we didn't even buy a CRM, we just vibe coded our own CRM or something, or just vibe coded our own tools. I was just wondering from your standpoint as like a leader, like how are you currently thinking about the relationship between teams building their own internal tools and figuring out for themselves, as opposed to buying like an external product that's already been built? Because like that seems to be shifting like crazy. Do I buy something that someone's already built, or do I just build it for myself? Like how are you currently thinking about that?
Yeah, we had a great example of this recently. When we launched our mobile app, we needed deeply integrated mobile notification, email, messaging service, which is basically like a customer CRM all out of the box. We ended up building our own because it took 3 days to build. And it's super customized for our systems, and it's secure, and we don't need to pay anybody for it. So I would always encourage you now to first explore that solution until you need to like scale to astronomical levels where you do need some managed solution. Then you can figure out, you know, what else can I integrate into my custom CRM that will scale.
So overall, when you're going from like a feature idea to the actual finished product, it seems like you mostly have people kind of orchestrating that whole flow. Is there any value you think in automating that further, or creating some kind of like shared context across that entire process? Or have you not found that to be a valuable approach?
So we've kind of relied on Slack and Slack threads for that shared context, and then context maps as well. But I think it's more of like a people consideration here, where you don't want to skip over some people in your org that may care about that part of the process. So for example, me bypassing the designer, but not taking the right steps to like honor his design concepts would probably rub him the wrong way. And if I do that like 100 times, he will leave the company. So you just, this is kind of where the last slide where is it another talk that I want to give, where you want to be really, really careful about how you shock your org with AI enablement and consider these things.
Sorry, we'll just do one more question. Dennis is around, by the way. After the event, he's going to be signing autographs.
What about integration tests? Known to unit tests, did you do the integration test?
Yeah, we have integration tests, and AI has coded those, but they're like basically always broken because one, we just ship too much stuff all at once, and they're just always broken. So we don't really maintain them, and then the cost of maintenance is just like not worth it. So I wish, yeah, I wish we had something like that, but I would almost prefer like an agent to come along and solve that for us. Yeah. Thanks everyone.